good morning, and soon to be good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mike. As you can see, I'm this chap here, and this chap over here is the person who founded Vanti, Raj Patel. So although I'm CEO, I didn't start the business. I joined Raj about 11 years ago now. I was employee number 5, at which point we were managing all our accounts in Excel spreadsheets, yeah, working a lot in education actually. So alongside a lot of the schools that I know, unfortunately, you guys aren't all in at the moment. So we've got good experience of trying to create technology for people in classrooms, lecture theatres. We built a fully immersive theatre at one stage. But since about 2013, when we first worked for the Library of Birmingham, we've been working very much in the public sector and corporate space. So how did I get here? Well, Catherine asked me, which is how I arrived to be here today, but it really is that squiggly line that you see at the bottom of your screen there. So I think throughout my own school experience, it was really a very linear approach to things. So it was kind of get your SATs, get your GCSEs, get your A-levels, go to university and get a job. And I think the important thing that I'd encourage you to think about is, are each of those qualification stages right for you? And are they going to, as a lot of other speakers have talked about today, allow you to follow your passion? I remember back in the distant past, it's actually my birthday today. I'm 37 years old today, which is a very
happy
very
birthday.
But anyway, thanks so much. I just about remember year 6. And I can remember one of the teachers asking me what I wanted to do, and I said systems analyst. I had no idea what a systems analyst was. I knew it was something that involved technology and it involved working with people. And so I'm very fortunate that although I did know a little bit about where I wanted to go, I definitely agree with Sek in terms of I definitely wasn't aware of the kind of plethora of opportunities that there are available in the world. And I think there's a lot of kind of now sadly a bit cliched videos, but searching things like Shift Happens and looking at the iteration of roles in the world today. You know, there are roles in our industry today that did not exist when I joined Raj 10 years ago. So I think it's really important to spend some time working on you, identify what you're really passionate about, and then see if there are places in the world that might be able to work with you as well. So I occupy quite a funny space in construction at the moment, and one that doesn't really have a very well-trodden path. So I live right in this intersection here, and what that means is I do don a hard hat occasionally. I am on building sites, and Vanti as a company since January of last year is now solely focused on installing technology in the built environment. So what that means is we work right from the early stages, and I'll talk to you a bit about the process that we go through alongside architects and other members of building design team. We look at the experience that people want to create in the building using technology, so how people are going to interact with it, what the sorts of touch points are, and then we'll often then innovate across to work with construction colleagues to actually deliver that technology into the building. And a lot of the time, we'll then go on to look after that technology for the lifespan of the building. So I've arrived here through a very strange kind of set of organisations. After university, I actually worked in a school. I was the person who looked after your networks. And coming straight out of university into that, I sat in the interview and said, I've never done any of this before. And the head teacher said, do you want to have a go? And overnight, I became systems administrator for 900 staff and students for a school in Birmingham. And that was actually where I met Raj. He was working as a contractor at the time. We really hit it off, and our whole focus was about how we could deliver technology that really helped staff and students in their learning. So both from a teacher's delivering learning, but also students receiving it. And we were the first school in Birmingham with a Microsoft Exchange server, which is a product that sadly now doesn't even exist. So that helped staff and actually students eventually correspond in email. And we were also the first school in Birmingham with a VPN. So it meant teachers could sit at home and connect into resources in the school, which was helpful in helping them plan lessons and get prepared for their days. We were not Flavour of the Month with Birmingham City Council, who we were constantly on the phone to asking for changes to their network. But we got there eventually and made lots of cool stuff work. So that was great. And we played a little part in helping the school become one of the most improved over the short time we were there. After that, Raj and I actually went our separate ways. He still had university to finish, and I worked for a set of management consultancies. So first for a company called Capgemini, and then later with Accenture. They both provided me amazing experience. I got to work with clients like the Foreign and Commonwealth Office. I worked with people like Dell Computers and Verizon Wireless. My best role ever in those 3 years was I was sent to Tel Aviv with a set of mobile phones, and I had to make 200 calls a day back to the US and test all the data connections on all those phones. What wasn't great about that is I got stopped by Israeli security on the way out with a lot of electronics, and they wanted to know what I'd been doing there. So I spent about an hour talking to them in a little room in the airport. Through that whole experience, I gained a lot of different skills. So the Foreign and Commonwealth Office was actually helping embassies and high commissions around the world. So I was talking to a lot of people who, for who English wasn't their first language. I was working on a system that I had very little understanding about. But that really allowed me to start honing my skills in terms of understanding, getting to the root cause of what people were saying and what they wanted. And then moving on from there with Dell Computers, I ended up mapping their global application architecture. And what that means is all of the software systems that Dell use from the point that you place an order with them on the telephone or on Dell.com, all the way through until a computer comes out the back of their factory and lands at your house or business at some stage later. And that got me really interested in things like business process design, understanding how to document those, but then also trying to explain very complex interactions between systems to senior people who maybe didn't necessarily have the technical understanding. And that's still a role that I really play today, is that translation layer between the technology industry and all of the things that happen there, and the construction industry, which broadly is still trying to understand how to use technologists like us in the most effective way and in their own processes in terms of how they build a building. So I was asked about how Vanti was saving the world. I don't think we're going to do it on our own, and as some speakers have already alluded to, I think there's an awful lot that we can all contribute to this. So this is our tiny little part of our 40-person company that sits in Birmingham. We do work with clients all over the world. So we've been as far away as Qatar. We've had some projects in New York, and we're currently working with a client who's expanding globally, and we're working on them in hyperscale data centers in the Netherlands, Belgium, and Finland, which has been an interesting logistical challenge from Birmingham, and now an even more interesting one in the middle of a global pandemic. So, as we've already seen, there is no planet B, and unfortunately, buildings do contribute 40% of the world's greenhouse gas emissions. So, there is a lot of work to do in making things more efficient. And I think one of the most upsetting things about me as someone who does care very much about the environment and wants to see things get better is we are constantly in buildings that are not commissioned properly. And so they will be set to be burning energy either out of the business day, or they'll have no understanding of nuances in our kind of human experience when we have things like bank holidays, and they'll be firing up their boilers as normal on a Monday morning, even though there's actually no one in the building itself. So there is a lot of work to do, and the construction industry is incredibly fragmented. So there are also a lot of different places to influence, and also a lot of different ways that need to be things that need to be joined together through the construction process. And also the time horizons of buildings give quite a unique challenge in terms of how we design and build them. So I've mentioned smart buildings. Hidden away in Vanti is AV and IT, so that's audiovisual and information technology. When we rebranded in 2013, thankfully our marketing company could see that we probably weren't just going to stay in those two little spheres. And so we're now much more broadly talking about technology in the built environment and ultimately smart buildings. So for us, to be a smart building, you have to design your experience around the people who are actually going to use it. And where technology is used, what we want to do is allow people to have great experiences, but also for that technology to help with space and energy efficiencies. And they're both very prevalent things in the world as we come back to, or back from, all being in lockdown in COVID. It's interesting as well, and one point just to touch on here is people often focus just on energy efficiency in buildings, but actually by enabling great experiences, you can facilitate those energy efficiencies very easily. And also in terms of how much money businesses spend on this stuff, the rough proportions are for operational expenditure of most large businesses. They would spend 1% of their operational expenditure on energy, about 9% on space, so the offices, warehouses, other facilities that they use, and 90% on people. And our argument to the industry is that if we can look at that 90% and really make that experience great, that's where they get the value. The 9 and the 1% come as a proxy of that. They're important, but unfortunately when you're talking to businesses about implementing this kind of technology, it all comes down to the pounds and pence that they're going to spend on it. So if you take a look in your airing cupboard or some kind of place near where your boiler is at home, you'll likely see something that looks a little bit like this. Sadly, and a lot of people often ask me if my flat where I live is one of the smartest ever. I actually have this exact model in my cupboard. And it upsets me every time I have to use it. So this actually controls the kind of time of day things switch on and off. Broadly, they're terrible to use. They're very unintuitive if you don't have a manual. And just for clarity, I'm not actually sat in my house at the moment. This artwork is not mine. And when we got here, the heating had been switched off, and we spent an eternity trying to work out something that looked a little bit like this. As to, with no manuals, how it needed to be reprogrammed so we could actually get some hot water on. And so things have moved on in terms of how we control buildings, but it's really been a digitization of the old systems that we once knew. And what we're aiming for is interfaces that look a little bit more like this. So this is something that we've designed recently for a commercial building in London. And it provides a touch panel interface to control all of the different facets of a room that you might see on there. It also even allows you to order coffee to your meeting room, should you so choose. And where we want to take this, and our big belief is that actually, as Seth mentioned, we're currently using all of these devices that provide us with really rich interfaces and allow us to consume information like ever before. But unfortunately, in the world of building systems and operating buildings, we haven't really moved to that stage yet. So we started building it, and this was something that we did for a show called the Facility Show last year. It's now become the Intelligent Buildings Expo, and this is showcasing our building operating system called SmartCore. And what SmartCore allows you to do is plug lots of systems together and deliver a really consistent experience for end users, whether they're visitors to the building, whether they're everyday users, whether they're the people that have to own and operate that building, to access all this information and to be able to control the systems around them. And what we want to do with SmartCore is ultimately give it back to the industry for free. And the reason that we think that's important is we've designed the system so it can scale from a small residential dwelling all the way up to some very big buildings that you're going to see in a second. So just quickly, and I won't go through this all in detail, if you are interested in this, there are some articles around this on our website. If you just go to the news section, there's loads and loads of stuff that you can read about this. But what we identified when we first started, well, after we first did our first smart building in 2015, was that if we had smart buildings, we by necessity had to have dumb ones. And so where I was talking about those buildings kicking into life at 9 o'clock on a bank holiday, that's where they sit, this kind of rules-based behavior of, you know, it's this certain time, okay, I'll power these things on and what have you. As we move through smart buildings towards intelligence, this is the place that we're currently at. And that kind of unified building control is really what underpins smart core. So the ability for users to not worry about whether they're talking to a heating system or a lighting system or a resource booking system or anything else in a building. They just want to see an application or an interface that allows them to get on with what they're doing quickly. And in a classroom, that might mean that rather than having a kind of remote control that sits on a teacher's desk to allow them to control it, there's maybe a panel on the wall that means it can't get lost, the batteries don't run out, and it gives a really consistent experience whichever room you're in. We also started trying to look at other industries. And so if you're a fan of cars, you may have heard of Tesla, who have very successfully now pushed hardware out into the world, but continue to push software updates to the car over the air. And what that means is that they can release new functionality to users in software, but they can also change how the hardware performs. And owners of the Model 3 recently received an update from Tesla in another country completely that gave them 5% more power in terms of how the car performed. Now, unfortunately, we lost the ability to couple this with construction because cars really have a lifespan of probably somewhere between, well, depending on if you lease them, probably up to 10, maybe if you're lucky, towards 15 years. And you certainly can't start, or you don't normally change out things like the engine, the drivetrain, the axles and all that kind of stuff. Once those kind of things start to break, you tend to get rid of them. So the other industry that we've taken a look at is aviation, and the jumbo jet, or the Boeing 747 that you can see here, is designed to last roughly as long as most buildings. So they're designed to last about 60 years. The interesting thing that Boeing did with the 747 is they made it entirely modular. And what that means is that over the lifespan of a 747, it will actually be refitted about 6 times. And that means its innards would change almost completely. What it also means is if there's new functionality in one system, for instance, the navigation system, you can remove the navigation system and put a new one in using standard interfaces without impacting the rest of the plane. And that's quite important for aviation because with a very good safety record, they certainly don't want to compromise that by a change in systems having a negative performance on the performance of the plane. And if you want a really bad example where Boeing have done that recently, if you have a little search around the 737 MAX, you can read some terrible stories of where software has actually caused the plane to perform really unstably in midair. So in terms of the actual life of a building where we work, as I mentioned, we work with all these people up front. So in the context of a school, the investor or building developer is likely to be your local council, but you would still have an architect that's designing the building and a design team that's looking at everything that goes in it. You would then normally appoint a building contractor, and they'd be the people who turn up with the diggers, the hard hats, the steel frames, the concrete and everything else to actually build the structure. And you'd have a set of contractors that then put everything into the space. And at that point, there's a handover. So the building contract finishes and we move more into the operation and maintenance of the building. And as you can see, that's very much akin to the 747 analogy I mentioned earlier, where building and estate management may be your caretaker or facilities manager if you have one at your school. And it will be that general change of projects that happen over school holidays and that kind of thing that upgrade the space over time so that you as staff and students can enjoy a great environment in which to learn. And so, as you can see, this is very fragmented, but it also relies on being able to thread technology through that whole thing. And that's really where we position ourselves for now. So just quickly then, some examples of where we worked previously. This is still, sadly, the smartest building in London. We worked on this in 2015. If you're interested in what it looks like on the inside or how to experience it, there is a 4-minute website video on our website. If you just go to the case studies section and click Informer, you can take a walk around and see the kind of systems that we put in there. But we managed to get some really great savings for Informer out of this building. So we can demonstrate that compared to other floors in the same building using the metering data, that actually Informer save about half of the energy compared to other people in the building. So that saves them a bunch of money, but it's also really good for the environment. They also managed to achieve the second highest environmental credential in the UK, which is that LEED Platinum certification on the bottom there. And we continue to work with Informer to upgrade this building. They're actually just about to roll out SmartCore, the building operating system I mentioned earlier, across all of their old floors, and hopefully the new floors that they're just in the process of commissioning. And then finally, this is one of the latest projects we've worked on. This is the Lodge. It's Tottenham Hotspur's hotel, not a hotel, on their training ground. So this is where all the players are currently staying in preparation for the return of the Premier League, so that they can stay safely isolated, but also use the facilities of the training ground. And this building runs SmartCore, and that means that when Harry Kane or others are staying there, they'll use this interface via an iPad to control everything in the room. So they can call down to reception, they can choose to watch films, TV, or listen to their music. And they can also pair their mobile phone with the room itself and play anything that they have stored on their mobile into the room that they're staying in. The most important feature of the Lodge is this interface though, and this is unprecedented in the industry in terms of being able to control the building. So the operations manager and all of his housekeeping team have access to this via laptops and on tablet devices, and they can control every facet of the building. So whether that's the background music that's playing through the corridors, or whether it's the individual control of all of the bedrooms and common areas throughout the entire building. The other thing they can do, you'll see top left there, there's something called circadian rhythm. When the players are playing on international fixtures, they actually use the lighting system to adjust the temperature of the lighting to help the players adjust to jet lag more easily, so that they can rehabilitate faster and perform a lot better more quickly. So one final thing just to add from me. We've talked about construction saving the world, but actually one of the things that Vanti's doing is pursuing an accreditation called B Corp. And that is where we're saying to the world that actually we're a purpose-driven organisation and not just all about profit. I think one of the most disappointing things for me is where experience is so often compromised in buildings because of money having a factor, and that is not always just because people want to save money and take it out. So we're really steadfast on creating a really inclusive culture. We have a very diverse workforce. We're very fortunate on that. We're still striving to do more, and we're still looking to put out a bit of a response around the recent events concerning Black Lives Matter. What we want to do is make sure that we've best understood things internally in our world before we start trying to champion a cause where we may have work to do ourselves. So I would urge you, as well as Passion, to be looking at organisations that are doing broader good in the world. And also, I think it is very tempting once you get on that career ladder just to keep trying to follow the money. I think make sure that you're tempering that with what's going on in the world around you as well. If you want to find out more about us, you can see our website, vanti.co.uk. We are on Twitter and Instagram. I think we could be doing a little bit more with Instagram, if I'm honest, but we do post a lot of things to Twitter, so things that are of interest and things that we're publishing. We've just this week launched our brand new product called Kahoo, and as I mentioned, we are looking at establishing the SmartCore Foundation, which would ultimately own the building operating system that I talked about and hopefully make it available to the world for free.